Now, what is happening in terms of the different harmonic elements? Because we don't have really harmony. I mean, we only have one melodic line. We have this descending profile here, clearly, so that's worth pointing out. But it's not fully descending, so towards the end, we have this little rising ascending motif. So I'd like to really highlight this better. So the motif is not fully descending. And that type of twisted motion is really what characterizes the further developments of the motif. So you can see these. It's almost like the same concept we were seeing in the previous video, where I was arguing about the arpeggio, that is really important for the melodies. Here, that arpeggio is clearly like highlighted with the three notes, the three main notes. We have A. I'll be using green as I was doing it last time. So we have A, F, and D, right? And these three notes are kind of like the main structural notes that are always present. And there are different ways to present them. So you can do it with steps, like in the first case, or you can do it by skips. Right? And these two forms really create what we can already ascertain or describe as ABA form. So you clearly have the A motif, or phrase A. We can say it's phrase A. We have a phrase B, which is a variation. And then we go back to the first original phrase A. Right here, phrase A again. And that kind of creates this ABA ternary form, which gives a lot of logic. I mean, it's needless to say that all of this is just going downwards. So it's a very big descent that it goes from the dominant, in this case, to the tonic. That's happening 3 times, but most prominently, I mean, the tonic that's reached is this low D, right? Quite modernistic in terms of nature, because at the same time, very minimalistic. We only have a melody that's a dominant, and every time that dominant is going to tonic, so we have this 5-1, constant 5-1, which is like a perfect cadence. And eventually that leads us to like the bottom depth, which happens to be this low D in the pedal, right? It's kind of hard to imagine how this arpeggio or this part would sound on the violin. At the beginning is quite clear, but that part is much more hard to achieve. And I think that it's quite impressive when we reach that D, the depth and the power that it has. Right. And the final thing that I would like to mention or draw your attention to, it's the importance of these silences. So there are 2 types of silences here. You have silences that are dramatic. So you have these dramatic punctuations. And there are other silences that are more like a little breath mark, or in a way articulation, right? So we're articulating with the silence at hand the 2 motifs. So this is more articulatory, this is more dramatic silence. But pauses are really present here, and throughout the entire toccata you can find this very unusual presence of silence. I mean, we have here this pause, another pause. Everything is super articulated. You have again here silences everywhere, and they're present all over the place. So that's not something that you would see much in Bach. Bach's music tends to have a much more constant flow, although still in the toccatas you might be seeing some of this writing, but even within the style of Bach, it's quite unusual and quite uncommon to see such a big frequency of silences, right? And these silences are what I believe contributes to the majestic sonority of the toccata and makes it so unique. So let's continue. The next thing that we have here is this blue thing. So clearly it's one of the most dissonant chords written at the time. We have this D, on top of which C sharp plays. That's already a dissonance. We have E, that's another dissonance already, that's a cluster. and progressively the chord emerges. So what is the chord that we can see? It's a diminished seventh chord, so it's the 7th degree, diminished seventh. And that chord is supposed to resolve into the tonic. The only thing that makes this more unique is that it resolves to what we call the Picardy third, which is the major. That would be like the normal resolution to D minor. And this Picardy third is particularly enhanced by the ascending motive that is produced by what we call the suspension, right? So is this 4 suspended, the 4 is supposed to go to 3, and that's exactly what it does, 4 goes to 3. So we achieve this sort of suspended chord that goes to major, but at the same time Bach is introducing that type of ornament. It's an elision, right? Instead of going directly to F, we have this little E. And it kind of resembles the motive we had at the beginning, which again kind of reminds me somehow of the Pink Panther theme with the same type of chromaticism. The interesting thing is that the ending, which is the most common place for introducing these Picardy thirds, because most minor pieces usually ended on a major mode, doesn't have that. So we have a clear D minor ending, right? And this is quite uncommon and very strong for the time. So the D minor ending with no Picardy third. And the other striking thing is that it's not a perfect cadence, it's a 4-1, which is a plagal cadence, right? So it might have been much more common to end the piece exactly where we left it. So end the piece with that type of Picardy third, right? With the 4-3 and the diminished chord. But basically, this statement contains everything that the toccata was going to be. So that's also quite sophisticated and modern. At the time, toccatas tended to be much more freer in form and improvisatory. In this case, the main ingredients have been set: 5-1, 5-1, chords, the 3 motives, and everything that's going to follow is just going to be development of that. So we can call this next section first development. That's how I would like to refer to it. The first development, which will last until that perfect cadence that we see there on the D minor, is basically the inversion of the motive. So this is what I would like to call inverted exposition. If the main exposition was based around the descending scale, or the descending path from dominant to 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, the next exposition or the development is an ascending one. You can see it's going upwards, clearly moving upwards, and it's going from the main notes in the reverse order. So we have the D, the F, and the A, right? So it's this arpeggio, and harmonically is just the opposite. So if at the beginning we were having what we can clearly describe as a perfect authentic cadence, here we would have a half cadence. So when we have this opening, the dramatic punctuation, the silences really what they do is they try to produce a sense of resolution, right? Whereas in the half cadence, well, what these silences do is they enhance tension, right? And they are increasing the amount of accumulated tension. And then as we move forward, you can see in this case that, well, all that it happens is just the opposite. So here we're going an octave below, right? Bach was doing an octave below, lower. This is an octave higher. So that's the inverted. Here we had 3 statements. So we had three statements of this motive, complex motive. It had 2 parts. Now we are having only 2 statements, right? So that kind of is a very common duality between moving between 2 and 3. And these 2 statements are combining at the same time the 3 and 2 rhythms. So you have 3 against 2, right? And you might be wondering what's the whole point of the meaning of 3 and 2. In Bach's music, numbers 3 and 2 acquire a special symbolism because 3 is associated in Christianity with the Trinity of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, whereas the number 2 is associated with the imperfection that happens from Adam and Eve, the first 2 human beings, right? And that type of symbolism is really present all across the religious pieces by Bach, which constitute almost like half or more of his production, and also we can see them translated into the more secular pieces like this one, right? So it's no wonder that he's like really combining these. And always we can see that even the motive itself is repeated 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and then we have the 1, 2. And the entire thing is basically a statement of 3 notes, right? So I could briefly kind of highlight here where the numbers are. You have here 3, that's again 3. In a larger mode, we can see that the 3 are happening with the big statement. So we have 1 here, here is the 2, and the A is there, the 3. By the way, actually I could shift this to here because that's where it appears. Right, so that would be really like the overall structure of it. Now, I think I wrote here 1. It was supposed to be 2, and that's supposed to be 3. So after we have this tension on the silence and the next tension, the next thing that we can see is the development of the blue motive, which kind of makes sense because it's the arpeggios. But in this case, the arpeggios are developed in a quite unique way. So what Bach is doing in this descending scale, it's to play with the natural minor scale. Prior to that, we had the harmonic minor. These are 2 different scales. So in the harmonic minor, we have the C sharp, and the natural one is the C natural. So we first heard all of these C sharps, and now we're hearing natural. And this is where it starts. It's descending, grades this chord. It's basically a descending sequence. Now, why is this quite uncommon? Because this descending sequence is performed in a very direct way, and basically it's doing parallel fifths. If you are conceptualizing the harmony there, it's E diminished, D minor, C major, all parallel fifths chords in root positions, right? So it's not very common to have a descending sequence of root positions. I would say it's very very uncommon and orthodox, and you wouldn't even find that in composers like Beethoven, who really played with parallel chords. What it's here clearly showing us that, I mean, this is very unusual for Bach, but you have it like in certain parts like that, and it is D minor prelude, but it's diminished chords, right? So the diminished chords kind of like have this logic, but in this case, we're alternating diatonic chords, and that's kind of unique. You have the D minor, the 2nd degree diminished, that goes to the tonic minor. Then you have the 7th degree major that goes to the 6th degree major. Right, so these are like the chords. Then we have the 5th minor, very unusual. That's kind of a modal mode, modal sonority. Then you have the 4th, the 3rd degree major, also not common in the D minor scale. You wouldn't harmonize with that usually. That goes to the tonic, and then eventually here is where the harmonic minor scale appears again with a diminished chord. So that's the harmonic minor, right? And that harmonic minor is clearly like the chord that eventually becomes this equivalent of that. So we have this diminished overtonic, right? This is actually the dissonance as was happening here is not from the diminished chord itself, but is of the fact that it's overtonic, right? So that's creating a very unique sonority. And here, if you're going to see what happens here, is a condensation of the diminished seventh of overtonic, right? So it's very related to that passage. And that descending sequence of root chords, it's very striking. I mean, there is some counterpoint, so it's not at all that bad. I mean, the counterpoint happens from the fact that these are ascending arpeggios, right? That in a way overlap. Right, and that kind of makes the whole sequence smoother, because if we are only to analyze it like this, that's a straightforward mistake in terms of proportion and harmony. But the fact that Bach is playing with these suspensions, you can see that it's the diminished chord, that then you have the E that's suspended that goes to D. Unfortunately, a lot of the times when I hear this played, it's played like this. So people just are highlighting the ugly part, so to speak, which is the parallel motion, but forget about the beautiful inner motion. So let's kind of highlight that. I think it's quite interesting and unique. So if I were to do this, let's maybe pick orange. So we have the E. Orange is not seen very well. Let's maybe go to yellow. There we go. The E is the suspension, then you have the D. And you could technically tie them and so for basically explain how this is a new chord. So we're moving from 2 in root position to D minor, and a D minor ninth, right? So it's a D minor ninth in which you have the last inversion. So it's like this: D minor, first, second, third, fourth inversion is with the letter D, right? That suspension of the E then resolves to D. And in a way, it avoids the parallel fifths, right? So the parallel fifths problem was the fact that E minor would go to D minor, but the moment we go this, we're not having the parallel fifths, we're having a fourth. And then that resolves to the fifths. So that's the true sequence that's happening there, right? And I would really like to highlight those suspensions. So suspensions that we're seeing. Suspension of 9 to octave. That's what we happen to have there. So it's the ninth that goes to octave. Like that, right? And you might be wondering, what is the whole overall logic of that, or what is the direction? Well, clearly it's descending, so that's kind of the opposite of what we were seeing there. If we look at the first exposition, and it was descending and then ascending. First we go down. That's down and then up. But in the first development, it's first up. Up, 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 and then it's descending. Right, so basically that's a quite unique development, because it's just the opposite in terms of movements, in terms of motifs, and there's a little extension. So I wouldn't argue that this is like, it's an extension that sounds like a little recitativo, right? This little recitativo, I mean, it does have some value, so we shouldn't just carelessly skip it through, but the main ingredients, apart from the direction that we can see, is the fact that we are seeing the motifs that were already presented. So what are they? We have the scale, which is the red part, and we have the arpeggio, which is the blue. So these two materials are interlocked in this type of motive, and they eventually lead us to the D minor tonic. So